A long time ago, I used to be enlisted in my country's military, and I was involved in the invasion of Iraq and stuck around for the subsequent war. I was not a part of the United States military though. It was a horrible time in my life. I saw so much casual bloodshed and what would be considered war crimes on a daily basis that was just swept under the rug in order to protect our own, and so that we could just keep marching forward, so that none of this would get in the way of the mission or what needed to be gotten done. I could write a 10,000-page book on all of the horrible shit that I saw, but I do not have time for that, and I want to tell you about something that affected me the most during my time serving. I don't want to spend my time giving you details on specific military procedures or who I serve with or my role, etc. I just want to get this out of my system as quickly as possible. So I will just start at the beginning of everything. I was part of a small deployment, only maybe 9 soldiers or so, who were being sent out to a remote village near Tikrit. Now, Tikrit was one of the hot spots for Iraqi insurgents, and it was a place where we had encountered a lot of hostiles and suffered some major casualties. There is a bridge right outside of the city. A Humvee in the middle of the convoy got stuck and held up the entire squad and left everyone as sitting ducks. The soldiers ahead had no choice but to plow through alone into hostile territory with very little information on the situation there. There was no way for them to head back out over the bridge since it was being blocked, and sitting out there without moving would have been a death sentence. It was for some of the people who got stuck. The vehicles behind were caught because they could not just immediately reverse due to the small amount of room to maneuver behind them. Soldiers were forced to ditch their vehicles and move on foot, use the vehicles and try to move them slightly to use for cover or just fall back. The comm lines were overrun. There was miscommunication everywhere, and half the people in charge were clueless and had no idea what was going on. We were being told conflicting orders every 2 seconds, orders that would get us killed if we followed them to the letter, and so we had to improvise. Half the people behind us did not get the message until too late, and then they were stuck in the same mess as the rest of us. It was a disastrous scenario, and we were lucky not to lose more men than we did. That invasion was the most poorly planned military operation I had ever seen in my entire life. The higher-ups were there mostly just for point scoring. Half the time, you would spend waiting around in the middle of nowhere, just waiting for some new bullshit for them to come up with, so that you could put your ass on the line in the middle of hellfire, just for some honor and recognition. It was the blind leading the blind. It was all just a race to see who could look better than someone else, who could justify the invasion better, who could make themselves seem more worth something by making something up. I despise that I took part in any of that shit, and I regret it every single day of my life. So, after enough of that ramble, we were sent out to hit this village under the cover of night. We barely even had enough batteries to power our MVGs for the operation. We had to be the most undersupplied schmucks in any army ever. The intel was that this village was being used as a front to house a large amount of insurgents who had a cache of weapons stashed away in one of the houses. The villagers were being used as cover so that nothing would be suspected and so that we could not just bomb them out of there. It was a dangerous damn operation, and I am still amazed that most of us got out of there alive. I'm not sure exactly what the deal was. It was weird, but I will explain more as we go on. We split into 2 groups and started at opposite ends of the village so that we could hit each house one by one. Our orders were to treat each and every single person in that village as a potential hostile and that it was a free fire zone. They lowered the bar of the ROA. Well, actually, they completely removed the bar. Both groups were in contact with each other the whole time. We hit a few of the houses, and both of us noted some strange things. We came across a group of insurgents, and they were just acting so strangely. They had no weapons on their persons, and they never even tried to reach for them. When we came across this group, they were in a circle just praying, and when they saw us, they barely even reacted. You would expect them to either surrender and beg for their lives or attempt to kill us, but they just did neither. I did not see so much as a change of a facial expression on either of the men. They were ordered to put their hands behind their backs and lay flat on the ground, but they just refused to engage with us in conversation. We had an interpreter in our squad. He was fluent in Arabic, and he told us that they were just doing a typical prayer that you would do multiple times a day in Islam. They were told that we had orders to shoot if they did not comply. Again, just no reaction. We did not want to slaughter them, but we had to maintain our distance just in case they had any explosives set up anywhere. Our interpreter tried speaking to them in Arabic, and when he did, they finally took notice. The second that a word of Arabic came out of his mouth, all of their heads shut up to look at him in unison. And their eyes. It could have been a trick of the light, but in that almost complete darkness that was only broken by our flashlights, it looked like their eyes had all flickered red. I can't remember exactly what he said because, of course, I do not speak Arabic, but he said something like, "Get on the ground or we will be forced to shoot." And one of the men replied to him, and then in an instant, they all just started running for him, running for our interpreter. We had no choice. We put all 3 men down before they could close the distance. It was so strange. None of the men even tried to run in our direction, despite us being closer, despite us having our guns trained on them. They just made a beeline for him, and even when the first few shots hit them, they did not want to go down. One of the men was hit 2 or 3 times, but it was not instantly lethal. Even when he had lost control of his legs and they just gave out from under him, he kept crawling for our interpreter. It was one of the scariest things I had ever seen. None of them screamed at being hit by the bullets. The only noises that came out of them was the releasing of air, like automatic and unconscious things, not a conscious scream. It was one of the scariest things I had ever seen. Not to mention, one of the other men did not even bother to stand up. He ran on all 4 legs and it just looked natural to him. He ran so inhuman-like. We got similar reports from the other group about insurgents acting strangely and not properly acknowledging them. We asked the interpreter what was said to him, and for a long while he did not want to say. He eventually caved and told us, after we made it clear that we needed to know that information. The guy apparently said, "Give your body to us," in Arabic. We asked if he knew what they meant, and he just shook his head. I asked if maybe it was a poor translation, if maybe it was a phrase that didn't work in English but worked in Arabic, and he said no, that it was absolutely correct. We were urged to exercise caution by RCO because it could easily be a trap. We had to stay on high alert at all times. This leads me into the thing that I want to tell you about, the purpose of me telling my story here. The second that we hit the next house, we knew that there was something incredibly wrong. I could smell the stench of sulfur and like something was burning. It smelled like hot coals in a fire that had been left on all day. The house was also unnaturally cold, which did not add up at all with the smell. Outside, even at night, it was blisteringly hot, but here, inside this place, I actually felt cold. Even with all of the gear on that I was wearing and the equipment that I was lugging around that weighed so much, I went from sweating to almost freezing. There was not much to the house, and we swept it pretty quickly. It was completely empty. Well, almost. Someone had tried to cover it up with a chest of drawers, but there was a wooden trap door that clearly led to a different, lower part of the place. You could not see anything at all. It was just a sheer drop with no visibility, It was obviously a trap and would be certain death. We had a back and forth between ourselves, RCO, and command. We had to secure it. We had no choice. They could easily just funnel up from our rear and kill all of us and ruin the mission. I was the unlucky SOB who had to go down there first. My only hope was that I could catch someone off guard if I slid down the ladder quickly enough. I basically leapt off of the thing and ran for some form of cover, of which there was none. I was screaming for the next person to come down as I pointed my weapon at the only man who was actually down there. The room I was in was even colder than the one above me somehow. It was all made out of a slate stone and was some kind of weird basement and was not all that big. This man was knelt down over what looked to be a circle of candles, and there was someone else down there too. A young boy, it looked like. He could not have been older than maybe 10 years old. He was laying down, flat on his back, his arms and legs chained to the wall using metal chains, which had him elevated slightly off of the ground. He was unconscious as far as I could tell. This man was different from the others. He had an AK-47 just across the room from him, at the other side of the boy, and even though he had his hands raised in the air, he kept eyeing it up while glancing at me. He kept shouting something at me, but I did not understand. He kept pointing, and when he did, I screamed at him to put his hands back up. He kept pointing at me, and also behind me, and then shouting something. I could not move any closer. I could not be fully sure that the room was clear, and that the place had not been rigged to blow if he was found. He pointed one more time, shouted something, and then just laughed. And while doing this, he all of a sudden just rushed and scrambled to his feet and ran for the weapon. But I managed to put 2 shots into him before he could get there. By that point, 3 of us were down there. That's all that could really fit. Shoulder to shoulder, we were basically squished into this place the entire width. Both of the soldiers beside me had their shoulders pressed into the stone wall. The rest of the soldiers were waiting up top, as there was not much space as it is, and we did not want to become stuck. The interpreter was down there with us. I was asking him what the man said, and by this point, I could tell that he looked really rattled. He looked like he was holding back tears and was just shaking his head. He was praying underneath his breath in Arabic. The interpreter did not tell us what the man said until everything was said and done and we were out of there. I will leave that for later. We managed to secure that basement inch by inch. There was nothing rigged anywhere. It was just this man who was now dead and this child strapped down. We had no idea why or what for. My other squad mate came to help me try and free the chains. Luckily, we had a pair of heavy bolt cutters that were passed down to us that were used as part of breaching protocol. It was the only way that we were able to get them off of the boy. The chains being rusted up definitely helped us. The chains looked like they could have been around 100 years old maybe. The interpreter was acting really weird. He did not want us to unchain him, but he couldn't even give us a reason why. He just kept saying that we shouldn't, that it was too risky, that it wasn't right. We had to shout some sense into him and tell him to nut up, basically. That if he lost his head right now, then we would all end up dead. The boy had nothing on his person. We obviously searched him and checked him before we undid the chains. He was just suspended above the circle of candles by his legs and arms, and he had some marks on his face. It looked like someone had taken a small knife and had cut lines into both his cheeks and his forehead. It just looked like random scattered cuts. There was a book open nearby to where the insurgent man was initially sitting, but it was in Arabic, and I never had the chance to ask what it was all about. I ran back over to the ladder while my squad mate, who had medical training, attempted to check on the boy and see if he was okay. I was asking my CO what the fuck we should do, if we could get medical help for the boy and send a few people to send him back. I was pretty much instantly denied though. I was told that our operation was much more important and would save more lives in the grand scheme of things than just one boy. We were straight up just told to leave him there in that basement, tied up to fend for himself. I can't say I was happy about it, but orders are orders at the end of the day. There was no sense getting myself killed or in the shit in a situation like that. My squad mate was a little bit less receptive though. He was incredulous to say the least. He insisted on wanting to just check his vitals and make sure that he would not die if we left him there. I told him no, that time was up. Someone had to be the bad guy. The boy was barely breathing, and we did not even have the supplies or the equipment to keep him stable. Out of nowhere though, this boy just starts taking these massive deep breaths, like he'd just been holding his breath underwater for minutes at a time. The medic was trying to talk to him, but he would not reply. I was still standing right next to our interpreter. I told him to get it over with and talk to the boy, ask him what they did to him and if he was okay, see if he could find out anything else about the upcoming houses, any intel that might help us do our jobs. He did so, but very, very reluctantly. I don't know what happened, but the boy went from staring up at the medic, looking sort of drowsy and clueless, to whipping his head upwards and staring in our direction. His eyes had gone that same flickering red color just for a second like the other people. He stood up. He started moving towards us, and I aimed my weapon. If I could have reacted just a split second earlier, nothing bad would have happened, because the medic grabbed the boy from behind and was trying to stop him from moving and calm him down. I could not shoot anymore. I could have so easily killed him by accident. The medic is shouting at the interpreter to tell the boy to calm down, and he is trying, but he has tears in his eyes. He can't even speak properly. He is just sobbing, and the boy is trying to wriggle away from the medic, and he looks so unnaturally strong, like it took a gargantuan effort just for him to be kept from moving. I don't know exactly what happened to me. I was about to run over and drag the boy away from the medic and force him to leave him there, but something strange happened. The second that thought ran through my head to move towards them and help, I instantly got this feeling in my body, a feeling of pressure. It made all of my muscles feel heavy and like I was underwater. And this image, it flashed through my head. To this day, I do not know what it was. It was just like for 5 seconds straight, I just saw this image inside my head. Like a mini nightmare, like I was not in the real world anymore, but only for around 5 seconds. I saw an image of me rushing over to the boy, and I saw myself stabbed. I saw myself being stabbed in the neck and dying on the spot. And after this image finished, I could not move my body. I felt like my muscles were all stiff and like I was glued to the spot. And all in a split second, it just happened. The boy pulled out a tiny knife he had inside his pocket. Before I could make sure my aim was perfect and pull the trigger, he had jammed it into the medic's neck. He fell backwards and hit the floor almost instantly, and I immediately put a few bullets into the boy. The boy was dead instantly. He dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes and made a heavy thud on the stone. The medic, he did not make it. The knife pierced an artery, and he bled out within seconds. He barely even had time to process that he was dying. The whole situation was just a shit show, and we got our asses chewed out multiple times. The rest of the operation went about as smoothly as it could, given everything that happened, given everything that we saw. Most of the houses were already cleared out by the time that we had moved on to the next. We found that weapons cache in another stone basement. The other group beat us to it. When we got there, all of the munitions had been set on fire. The other group said that it was not them, that everything had already been set alight when they found it. A few days later, once everything was all over, I managed to flag that interpreter down, and I forced him to sit down and tell me exactly what was going on. He was still pretty evasive, but he told me what that man in the basement said when I was there. The insurgent apparently said, "He's coming. Look, he's coming. He's coming for you. Look behind you. He's coming to get you." And then after that, he laughed and ran for his weapon, like I said. Again, he had no explanation as to why he said that, and I don't really have one for you either. Like I said, worst night of my life. I know a lot of you military boys have some really messed up stories, but I've never seen anyone talk about anything as extreme as what I went through. But yeah, I just had to get it all out there. Okay, so when this happened to me, I was staying at my old grandpa's rural farm in South Dakota. He grew corn there, and he had a big old piece of land, really big. Great place for camping, for hunting, just roaming around and being one with nature. It was great for pheasant hunting too, so we would come and visit quite often. There was this small trailer-style house that me and my young brother would stay in. My grandpa would leave me and my brother alone while he would go to the nearest bar at night, which was pretty far away, by the way. He's a drunk, so we know he's going to be coming back late every single night. We would screw around in the house and watch TV for a few hours, and at one point on this one night, I started hearing cracking, like someone was driving their car through the cornfield and hitting everything on the way. The family Labrador is going ridiculous. He's just howling like crazy and he will not stop. I go over and sit at the window in fear because I could not see any car lights outside, and it really sounds like something big is smashing through the 6 feet of corn. My brother is trying to get a hold of our grandpa through the local bar's phone since he did not have a cell phone, but we could not get a hold of him. I am looking outside the window and the sound has stopped. In the moonlight, I can clearly see 2 all-white figures crawl out of the cornfield. These things looked like fucking Gollum. They were all white. They were wearing no clothes. They had these really long arms and they were walking on all 4s. At this point, I got my brother to get me my hunting 12 gauge because I was way too freaked out and I wanted to protect us. They're like putting their noses in the air and like sniffing or something. I open our front door really slowly, and instantly, as soon as my door opens, they fucking turn and stare at me with these huge black eyes that I will never, ever forget. When they do this, I just shit my pants. I just react instinctively. I let off a 3.5-inch shell at them, and one of them lets out this inhuman screech that pierces my ears. I fired from our doorway to the field, like 30 yards or so away from them. They both run back into the corn crazy quickly, making these hyena-like sounds. About 2 hours later, our drunk grandpa finally shows back up, drunk as shit. He is slurring and damn near incoherent. I ask him about what I just saw and try to explain to him, and when I do, he basically instantly sobers up. He insists that we must be imagining stuff, and he cuts our hunting trip short and sends us back home. What did I shoot that day? Okay, so my story was not all that scary, just really, really weird, and I have never really understood what happened. Weird physics, I guess. I was maybe 7 years old, I don't know. It's one of my earliest clear memories. I live around all of my cousins and stuff. We're a big family in a big house. I am the youngest of my generation in the family. I'm always the kid who wanted to tag along and who just got brought along out of sympathy. I have a bit of a horrible temper at the time because I am always getting picked on and basically the family punching bag for all of my cousins. I decide one day after being thrown into a briar bush that I am going to kill my cousin. Not like premeditated. He was still right there. I had just crawled out of the bush while he stood there laughing. I grab a sharp torn bit of metal that was just lying around. We're kind of out in the country. There are plenty of metal scraps and stuff, and there are abandoned buildings all around with just things thrown everywhere. I've seen this in all of the movies. I will just chuck the piece of sharpened metal at him, and it will spear him, just like when I throw my knife at the wall. Again, we're kind of out in the country. We throw knives at the wall for fun. Yeah. I throw the makeshift spear. It doesn't go anywhere. Time seems to just kind of stop. The spear kind of spins in front of me for what feels like forever. My cousin is not moving or saying anything. He is just stopped. It seems like he stopped mid-stride. His foot is like frozen in the air, like he's playing musical statues, only he's not wobbling even an inch. I decide in my head, well, if throwing it won't work, I will just grab it and charge him with it and pierce him that way. I go to grab the thing. It slices my hand to the bone and then just suddenly drops to the ground. Like literally, just drops vertically completely. It does not carry any forward momentum. Everything just suddenly resumes. Birds are suddenly making noise again, and my cousin is still walking towards the house, not really noticing this apparently. I run back to my house crying with a cut open hand. The weird thing is, I don't think it would have hit him, or even killed him if it had. Maybe it would have done, I don't know. Maybe what happened saved me from becoming a murderer as a child. I guess my mind could have been playing tricks on me, as everything seemed to have stopped while it spun. Even for the time duration, it could have just been my perception, I guess, but I don't know. I did have that a lot as a kid, when I really lost my temper. When I got really searing mad, things seemed to just slow down, and I would always be stopped from making a rash decision. I would go to punch someone and it would seem like it would take forever, and then just suddenly it wouldn't happen. My arms would just be back down by my side. But yeah, it did just spin there, and I did slice my hand open, which shouldn't have happened. It was just a weird thing, really unexplainable from my perspective. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Okay, so I worked as a fish and game trooper in Oregon for a few years. I quit eventually because I highly underestimated the amount of negative encounters you have with hermits on the river. If they're not shooting at you from a bush, they are screaming for help and dying after being attacked by something or plugging up some waterway with their corpse. The only paranormal thing I've ever seen before in my life, and I'm sure of what I saw, was a white birch along the shoreline of a river I was surveying. I'd gone up that river a lot, and I had never seen it before. It was a pretty hot day in the summer, and I was looking for a typical shoreline damage and erosion from the winter months. A lot of those ways do not get traveled for almost a full season or two by anyone who will report the important stuff. I was surveying the river far ahead through some binoculars, and I saw this white birch standing out. It was not far enough away that it could have been easily something else. I could easily see the textures and black eyes of its bark. I was getting really bad vibes from it, and I tend to rely a lot on my paranoid intuition. I stopped and paid attention to the area around me because I thought it might be my subconscious letting me know that a hermit was nearby. I looked back and I could see the birch with my naked eye, and I focused towards it because something was just off. At this point, I noticed the entire area had been completely quiet, when normally there were cicadas chirping, birds screeching, and grass moving around. I did not notice when it had gone quiet, but I could barely hear the river below when I heard it clearly before. I saw that the tree was moving off in the distance. First, I had assumed it was just heat waves, but when I looked through my binoculars, I could clearly see it making an S-shaped bend, and then the inverse, back and forth in a bouncing pattern for what felt like a solid minute. I did not take my eyes off of it, but at some point, I felt like I had missing time and it was gone. Everything was back to normal after that. So, this story happened to me when I was staying at my cottage with my dog. My phone was on airplane mode because I'm just taking it chill. I'm relaxing by the fireplace. There is no one around me in a 1 mile radius. I do this every month when I want to take some time off from the city and all of the turmoil. I have fallen asleep, and at around 1 a.m., the stationary phone starts ringing. Keep in mind that I have a super solid mind, and I would not get freaked out even if Bigfoot was knocking on my front door. I'm like, screw that. I'm way too lazy to pick up the phone. It rings for about a minute straight, then it stops for 5 seconds, and then starts ringing once again. I pick it up and immediately exclaim my discomfort. I don't even care who it is. Are you insane, calling me at 1 a.m.? I hear incredibly deep breathing in the background and nothing else. I'm basically listening to some guy on the other end, breathing deeply, trying to creep me out or just piss me off. I'm like, yeah, nice hearing from you, asshole. I'm unplugging my phone now. Go and fuck yourself. That is when I hear the front porch door opening, and of course, my dog reacts immediately. I promptly investigate. There are indeed footprints of a stranger in my front yard. My dog immediately tracks them down. At a certain point, they vanish completely at the middle of my front yard.